Check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2. Check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Well, the governor's greetings and people, I'll say good morning. On behalf of the Black Hawk County Republicans, I want to welcome all of you who've turned out today. It's going to be my great honor and privilege to introduce the speaker. You know, in our caucus environment that we have in Iowa, and by being first in the nation, we have the wonderful opportunity to meet and greet candidates up close. Today, as you meet Governor Christie, you're going to find that he has a very warm, personal side that not always shows up. I've heard it, but it will today. I'm excited to be here for the same reasons that many of you are, is to talk to Governor Christie, to hear his thoughts, but he's the one candidate that has remained focused on the ultimate goal, as far as I'm concerned. That's the White House and beating Hillary Clinton. I want to just briefly go through the governor's experience. Most of you know this, but he served over 6 years as a U.S. attorney for the state of New Jersey. But he didn't just serve. He gained a reputation for being a capable and fair-minded prosecutor. Everybody doesn't leave that mark. While governor for the last 5 years in the state of New Jersey, you know it's a liberal state. He's been working with the Democratic legislature. And again, he didn't just work with them. His reputation is he gained national acclaim for moving legislation through and while disagreeing with many of the constituents in his home state. The one thing I've picked up, I've heard the governor speak twice. Besides that warm personal side, there's a gift that each of the last 3 presidents have had. If you think about it, I call it charisma. It's a magic way of people liking you when you speak your mind, but you say it in a forceful but honest way. The governor has a heavy dose of charisma, and it's my great honor to bring to all of you in Iowa the governor, the Honorable Chris Christie. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, listen, Ann, I don't need Mary Pat here. I got Ron. You know, usually such nice things are reserved to be said about me by my wife, and I appreciate it, Ron, very much. I appreciate your introduction and your warm welcome here this morning. Appreciate all of you taking some time to come out. And I'm going to continue to kind of move around so I don't keep my back to folks over here as well. But thank you all for being here this morning. I just want to say a couple things off the top, and then I want to leave the rest of the time for you all to ask me questions about whatever is on your mind. I think that's the great thing, as Ron pointed out, about Iowa's system and being the first caucus state, that you do get the opportunity to interact with us, and I want you to interact. I don't want you to just sit here and listen to me give some speech that I may have written a long time ago or someone may have written for me. I want you to be able to ask me questions and hear how I respond. I think that's the best way for you to evaluate whether or not somebody is really prepared for the challenges that are ahead of us, both as a party in making sure we defeat Hillary Clinton and we win back the White House, and then as a president to confront the challenges we have as a country. I was struck yesterday to read some news accounts about the fact that Al-Qaeda is now reconstituting terrorist camps in Afghanistan, and that the Taliban is once again asserting itself in Afghanistan. This sounds like a movie from nearly 15 years ago. And you have that combined with the president saying just a week or so ago that the reason that you, the American people, are so anxiety-ridden about terrorism is that you watch too much cable TV. He says he doesn't understand your anxiety because he doesn't watch cable TV. I think what the president has discounted is your anxiety is driven by the dead bodies in Paris and by the dead bodies in San Bernardino and by those families feeling an incredible sense of violation and loss and betrayal by their own government. See, the first and most important job that this government has, and because this president wants the government to do so much, I think he's lost track of this. The first and most important job of the government is to protect the safety and security of the American people. And so you saw just a few weeks ago the Los Angeles school district, the second largest school district in America, closed down. 450,000 students not going, or 650,000 students rather, not going to school because of an email threat. Then you saw in Nashua, New Hampshire, the same thing. An email threat came in, they closed down the entire school district. Why is that happening? I would suggest to you it's happening not only because of the events in Paris and San Bernardino, it's happening because local folks no longer have faith or confidence in the fact that the American government will protect the American people. So they're taking matters into their own hands, saying, I can't trust that the federal government's going to do their job here, but I'll count on my local police and my local school district and my local town council or committee to make these decisions. That's an awful place for our country to be. And for the president to discount this as some creation of cable news, I think is insulting to the American people, to our sensibilities, and to our intelligence. And you have the woman who wants to replace him, who said at a debate in New Hampshire just a week ago that she thought we were exactly where we needed to be on ISIS. So I'm not going to call her Secretary Clinton anymore. I have taken to calling her Secretary Happy Talk, because she's going to try to happy talk her way to the White House. She's going to try to convince you that everything you see and you feel isn't real, and that she understands better than you what the situation is around the world. Well, if you look at her record as Secretary of State and what the country and the world looked like before she got there and what it looks like now, I don't know that she's the person we should be relying on to say that we should believe her and not our lying eyes, as she would say. Right? So why is this so important? And why is it so important in this race? Because if we don't get this right, nothing else matters. We've talked about lots of different issues. I have a big plan on entitlement reform. I have a big plan on tax reform. I have a plan on education reform and rebuilding our military. All those things are extraordinarily important and should be and have been topics of conversation in this race. But if we don't get the safety and security of the homeland right, none of the rest of it matters. I want you to remember what this country was like in the days after September 11th. No airplanes flying anywhere in the country. Stock exchange was closed. There was no sports, professional, amateur, or youth. Everything that makes the heartbeat of this country work stopped. And it stopped because we were scared. It stopped because we were rightfully frightened for the safety of our spouses, our children, our grandchildren. And when that happens, the human instinct is to hunker down and to protect our own and to make sure that nothing happens to the people that mean the most to us in our life and who we love the most. I've said a lot of times in this race that I'm the only person in this race who has the experience of actually dealing with this. I was named U.S. Attorney by President Bush on September 10th, 2001. And the job that I accepted on September 10th became a very, very different job the next day. And so I want to end the start of this by telling you about that day. And not that day from a historical perspective, but from a personal one. So I get a call from the White House on September 10th at 4:30 in the afternoon offering me the job of U.S. Attorney in New Jersey, and I accept it. And it's an amazing day for me and for my family. What an extraordinary honor to be asked by the President of the United States to do this job. And I had all kinds of ideas about what I wanted to do. So I took the next day off for my law firm. They were thrilled about that, as you can imagine, as I started to pack up my boxes and get ready to go. And the next day, my wife did what she had done every day for nearly 20 years. She got up, she left the house at 6 o'clock in the morning, she drove her car to the train station, she took the train to Jersey City, New Jersey. There she got on the PATH train that takes you from Jersey City, New Jersey to the basement of the World Trade Center. And she took those big escalators from the basement of the World Trade Center up to the ground level, and she walked 2 blocks, her 2 blocks that she walked every day to her office building, 2 blocks from the World Trade Center. And that morning for me, we had 3 children at the time. We have 4 now. We had 3 then. They were 8, 5, and 1. So I took the 8-year-old and the 5-year-old to school, and then came home, and I turned on the television set, and the first building was on fire. So I called her immediately And I said, what's going on? And she said, no, they say it's just a commuter plane that got off course and hit the building, and the fire trucks are coming. We can hear them outside the building, and it's all going to be fine. And we're just sitting here working. We're not paying any attention to it. It's on the TV, but we're working. So we just started talking about my day, what I was going to do, her day, what she was going to do. She wanted to make sure that, you know, I had the 2 kids brush their teeth and all the rest, because guys forget about those things, as we know, when we're in charge of doing this stuff. And then the second plane hit the second building while we were on the phone. And she said to me, she could feel it. Her building shook. And then her boss said, everyone has to evacuate to the basement of their building. So she said to me, I got to get off the phone. They're evacuating us to the basement. I'll call you as soon as I can. So in the next couple of hours, as you know, both buildings collapsed. The Pentagon got hit. Plane crashed in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, that was headed for Washington, D.C. And I kept trying to find my wife. And I called her cell phone, over and over, and got no answer. Then I got a call from my kids' school. They said since so many of the children in the school had parents who worked in Lower Manhattan, that they felt like they needed to tell the children about the attack. So they said, so when you pick your kids up today, you need to be prepared to answer questions from them about how their mother or father are doing. Continued to try to find my wife and couldn't. And so I got about 20 minutes away from having to leave to pick up my kids. And I'll tell you the 3 things that were running through my mind. The first one was, what would my life be like without my best friend? Mary Pat and I had met in college when she was 18 and I was 19. And we got married right after she graduated. And we had spent our whole adult lives together. We had grown up together. I couldn't imagine what my life was going to be like without my wife. The second thing I was thinking about was, what am I going to tell Andrew and Sarah? When they get in that car, they're going to ask, is Mom okay? And I didn't know, as a father, what's the responsible thing to tell those children when you don't know? And then the third thing I was thinking about was, if the worst happens, am I ready to be a single father? Am I ready to raise these 3 children? We had a 1-year-old at home also, Patrick. And I was wondering, am I ready to do this? What kind of father am I going to be without Mary Pat? About another 10 minutes passed, and then the phone rang, and I got the greatest phone call I've ever gotten in my life. She was on the other end of the phone, and she told me that after the buildings had collapsed, they were told to stay put, and they didn't want to stay put because they were scared. So a group of them got T-shirts that they found in the basement of this building, and they wet the T-shirts, made them soaking wet, and wrapped them around their faces. Because when they got to ground level, they couldn't see anything. There was so much dust and soot and debris that they couldn't breathe. And they joined hands together, 6 of them, and they started walking north, away from the disaster. And she eventually got to Midtown and found a payphone that was working, and that's where she called me from. So when I got to pick up the kids, I was able to tell them, Mom's okay, and we're going to figure out a way to get her home. She took a boat that night. It was the only way to get off the island. She took a boat that night to the Jersey Shore. And I drove down to the Jersey Shore to Atlantic Highlands to pick her up with the boat. And they kept us about 3 blocks away from the dock. And I saw someone walking down the street towards me that I thought was my wife, but she was wrapped in a blanket. And when she got to me, she was soaking wet. I said, what happened to you? She said, well, when they found out I came from Lower Manhattan, the fire department was there, and they didn't want us bringing any contaminants into the state. So with a fire hose, they hosed us down from head to toe. And then there was a local department store there that was donating blankets so that we could be warm. They wrapped us in blankets. Got her in the car and got her home, and one of the first calls we got was from a neighbor of ours who's in our parish. And she was married to a guy who Mary Pat helped get a job on Wall Street. He had lost his job, and Mary Pat circulated his resume among some of her friends, and he got a job at a place called Eurobrokers, which was on the 44th floor of World Trade Center Tower 2. And she asked, did you see Frank at all? When you were leaving, did you see him? Did you see him on the streets? Did you see him in the morning? I haven't heard from him. He said, no, I didn't see him. And his wife said, well, I'm sure he's in a hospital somewhere and he just can't call me. Well, you know, in our hearts, we knew Frank was in no hospital and he never came home. And now the gym at our local parish is named after him. Later on that night, we got a call from our oldest son's best friend's mom. Her husband had worked at Cantor Fitzgerald on the 105th floor of World Trade Center Tower 1, and no one got out of there alive. And for the last 14 years now, I've watched this young man come in and out of our house without a father, his siblings without a father, his mother without a husband. And every year on Facebook, on his father's birthday, he puts a picture of his dad on the cover of his Facebook page, and he just writes one line. He says, Dad will never forget you. What I fear now in this country is that we're forgetting his dad, that we're forgetting Frank. I can't, because see, unlike most folks in the rest of the country, I see these people every day. New Jersey lost more people on 9/11 than any state in the country other than New York. And so every day, especially where we live in the northern part of the state with so many people commuting into New York for work, we see the widows and the orphans and the widowers. And what we know is that for those of us who had the responsibility after that day to protect the country, we know there's nothing more important. Not only because of what it would do to our country as a whole, but what it does to those individual lives. When I become President of the United States, no one's going to have to brief me about that. No one's going to have to teach me about actionable intelligence and what we need to do. No one's going to have to tell me about what you do to connect the dots and to keep Americans safe. This is not the time for on-the-job training, everybody. This is not the time to put somebody in the chair in the Oval Office like we did 7 years ago, who's never managed anything bigger than a Senate staff of 30 people, and who has never had to make an executive decision of consequence that they're held accountable for. It's not time to put someone in the Oval Office who's only taken roll call votes on votes in the committee or the subcommittee or the floor. United States senators are fine people, but they've never run a darn thing in their lives. For 13 years, that's what I've been doing. 7 years as U.S. Attorney and now 6 years as Governor, making decisions and being held accountable for them, the good ones and the bad ones. When the FBI director comes in on my first day as president to brief me, he won't have to introduce himself. I worked with him. He was the U.S. Attorney in Manhattan after September 11th, and I was the U.S. Attorney in New Jersey. Jim Comey and I worked together, and he knows that if I'm sitting in the Oval Office, that the men and women who work for him will be supported and backed up to do the jobs they need to do to protect us. Our police officers in this country will know they'll be backed up because they have someone in the Oval Office who has done what they do. And all those other issues that we talked about that I mentioned before are really important, but nothing's more important than this. And we forget that day and what happened at our own peril. Because what San Bernardino showed is this, that if a center for the developmentally disabled in San Bernardino, California is a target for terrorists, then any place in America is a target for terrorists. These folks are different than Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda wanted to do big things. ISIS said after Paris, this is good, but the only thing sweeter would be the taste of American blood. That's what we're up against. We can fight them and beat them, but we need a president who knows how to do it, who's made decisions before in this area, and who has the resolve and the experience to be able to get it done. And so, what I want you to think about when you're deciding about who to support and who to caucus for on February 1st, two things. First, who's prepared to do that job? who's been tested and is ready and mature enough to do that job from minute one of day one of the next presidency. And second, I want you to think about who's the person who you want standing on that stage next September to prosecute the case against Hillary Clinton, because the road to the White House goes through her. She's the nominee for the Democratic Party. We already know it. Who can beat her? Who's going to be tough enough to stand across from her and take all that she's going to throw at that person and be able to respond in kind? Who's going to look like a deer in the headlights? Who's going to look like it's their first rodeo? We cannot put inexperience on that stage. If we do, Hillary Clinton will run that person over, no matter how pretty they are, no matter how charismatic they are, no matter how smart they are. We need experience. And listen, being in the toughest media market for a conservative in America, New York and Philadelphia, every day, there's not a thing Hillary Clinton can throw at me that hasn't been thrown at me already. So I'm running for this job full out. I want to be president of the United States. I'm not doing this to get a Fox talk show. I'm not doing this to get a book deal. I'm doing this because I want to be president. And it all starts here with you. Last thing I'll say to you is that, I had somebody in New Hampshire a few weeks ago say to me at a town hall meeting, I feel powerless. And I said to the person, I don't want to hear that. Sit down. The guy kind of looked at me. You tell me to sit down? I said, yeah, because you're a New Hampshire Republican. And I said to him that day, New Hampshire and Iowa Republicans right now are the most powerful people in the world. You're going to take a field that started at 17, is now down to 12, and you're going to take it from 12 to 4 or 5. Just you. The other 48 states aren't going to get to weigh in. It's you. You're going to decide who the rest of the country has to pick from. And you're going to decide who the best person is to take on Hillary Clinton. You're not powerless. You're the most powerful people in the world. So I'm going to let these powerful people ask me some questions now. So I'm ready to answer questions, whatever you want. I want to let you know, there's only one rule in my town hall meetings. That is, you raise your hand and I call on you. You get to ask me whatever you want. It's not like some of these other town hall meetings where people write down questions and you have to give them beforehand, and then staff reads them, and then they decide which ones I want to answer, and then they give me those, and we act like that's a town hall meeting. It would be wrong for me to say who does that among the candidates, be indiscreet, but her initials are Hillary Rodham Clinton. So you raise them up. I'm happy to answer your questions. Yes, sir.
Okay, talking about not forgetting 9/11 victims, where do you stand, or could you comment on Rand Paul's stand in relation to the NSA?
Yeah. I could talk about Rand Paul's position on the NSA. I think Rand Paul and I have had a lot of good back and forths over time on this. Listen, here's the problem. Senator Paul and Senator Cruz, by the way, who also voted to take authority away from the NSA, sided with the president. And what they've done is take power away from the NSA to be able to connect the dots. Let me make sure you understand. If you listen to Senator Paul, what he would make you believe is that the NSA was reading your emails and listening to your phone conversations with your wife or your husband. None of that's true. It's all a lie. All the NSA was doing was collecting phone numbers. And in fact, there were no names attached to those phone numbers. They were phone numbers. And if those phone numbers matched up with a phone number of a known terrorist overseas, then what happens? Then the Justice Department has to go to a court and apply under the Fourth Amendment for a warrant to get the phone records of that number so they know who the person is. So a judge has to decide that, whether you have enough information to do that or not. Then let's say we get those phone records and we find out they're yours. And then we look at your phone records and we see that you've been talking to this guy who's a known terrorist a lot. Then what do we have to do? Then we got to go back to court again, make another application to ask to tap your phone. And then a judge makes that decision again. Every spot along the line, there are Fourth Amendment protections that take it out of the hands of the executive branch and give it to the judicial branch, the way our government is supposed to work. If you listen to Senator Paul and Senator Cruz at the time, he's now changed his tune, but Senator Paul still says that somehow this is an invasion of privacy. I think you want us to know if someone in this country is having frequent phone contact with a known terrorist overseas. I think that's something you want us to know. And I think you can be comforted by the fact that an independent judge with lifetime tenure, insulated from politics, on this issue, gets to make that call. Do I have enough evidence or don't I? Now, the reason I understand this is Senator Paul doesn't have the first idea of what he's talking about is because I've done it. I've had to make these applications under the Patriot Act. I've had to make applications to get phone records, make applications to get wiretaps, make applications to do surveillance. When you have the obligation to do that, and it's my signature that goes to the court, certifying that I believe we have sufficient evidence to ask for this, you don't do that lightly, because your name's on the line. And so Senator Paul said in the first debate, I want to have less information on innocent people and more information on terrorists. Okay, I agree. Here's my question to him then. How do you know? They don't walk around with sandwich boards on down Main Street, you know, and say, like, I'm a terrorist plotting against America. We have to use covert intelligence capability monitored by the courts to make sure that we can connect the dots. And what was the biggest criticism of the 9/11 Commission after the attacks was that we were not coordinating between the FBI, the CIA, and the NSA. We weren't sharing information. We weren't working together so that one hand didn't know what the other hand was doing. The mail's here, by the way. Happy New Year. Hope there's some checks in there for you guys. That's why I take the position I take. And that's why Senator Paul is wrong, and why Senator Cruz was wrong to vote the way he did. Now, if you listen to Senator Cruz now, this is why Washington is such a strange place, right? You listen to Ted now. Ted says, I'm going to bomb ISIS. I'm going to carpet bomb them, and we're going to see if sand will glow. That's how much I'm going to bomb them. Well, man, that sounds tough, doesn't it? That is tough stuff. That's a tough guy. Where was that toughness last summer? When he took away tools from the people who are supposed to protect us for political purposes. Because he was more worried back then about running against Rand Paul than he was worried about running against me. He says, okay, well, let's see. If I change my position to this, then Rand Paul can't criticize me for this. Now all of a sudden, life changes, right? Now we're being attacked by terrorists again. Now he says, well, I got to be the toughest guy. So now I ran to the left of Chris Christie in the summer. Now I'm running to the right of Chris Christie because I want everybody to think I'm the toughest guy in the race. Just please be careful. And we got a couple of guys like this in this race. The guys who talk really tough. Now, I am not known for light and easy talk. Okay? No one is doubting that I'm tough. But it matters what you do more than it matters what you say. And we've had a president in the White House right now who says a lot of stuff, but the record doesn't match the rhetoric. Please, let's not make the same mistake again. When Ted Cruz had the chance to be tough, he played politics. And now he's trying to convince you he's tough because he's going to carpet bomb ISIS. But then in the last debate when they asked him, well, does that mean you're going to kill civilians? Because carpet bombing means bomb everything. He then said, and this is where experience is really important again, he said, we're going to do targeted carpet bombing. I don't know. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. How do you target carpet bomb something? You either carpet bomb it or you target bomb it, but you don't do both at the same time. But he said it. You're going to target it. Listen, everybody. This is what happens when the only responsibility you have is to vote yes or no when someone calls your name. I mean, they don't even have to decide when to do it. This is like, grade school. They schedule when you have to be there. Then you show up. Then they ask you a yes or no question. You say yes or no, and you give a big speech that nobody listens to, and then you leave. I understand. That's their job. They chose. They ran for that. I would never run for that. Someone asked me a few years ago, when we had a United States Senator in New Jersey pass away, and the governor has to appoint the replacement. They said, are you going to appoint yourself? I said, I would rather jump off a bridge than be in the United States Senate. I cannot imagine anything more inconsequential once you've been a governor and a U.S. attorney. I want to make decisions. And that's the difference. And that's what I'm talking about in terms of experience. It's the difference between doing it and being told about it. It makes a big difference. And that's why he's wrong on that issue. Yes, sir.
Hi there. And I'm going to videotape your response.
Excellent. I assume everyone's videotaping everything these days.
Great question about the NSA. I'm an atheist voter. I'm a big supporter of the separation of church and state. And I feel like the Republican Party wants to just tear that down. How would you as president uphold it or strengthen it?
Well, first of all, I disagree with the premise of your question. I think that the Republican Party believes, and I believe, that everyone in this country should have the right to pursue their religious beliefs or lack thereof as aggressively as they want to, as long as two things happen. One, that you do so without committing violent acts, and two, that you do so without trying to impose your religious views on somebody else. Now, you bring it up in the context of atheism, but we're having this conversation in the context of Islam right now, too. The fact is, again, this is the difference between experience and inexperience. We have one candidate who says, ban all Muslims from the United States. Okay. I guess that would be an interesting thing to try to do. Let's put aside the Constitution and all the rest of it. I assume that what he means by that is that if we keep all Muslims out, we'll be safer. That's just wrong. It's just fundamentally incorrect based upon our experience. We don't need to do that. What we need to do is to get the intelligence that we need to find out who the radical Islamic jihadists are. That's who we want to keep out. New Jersey has the second largest Muslim American population of any state in the country. Michigan is first, New Jersey is second. I've dealt with the Muslim American community now for 13 years as the federal prosecutor after 9/11 and now as the governor of the state. What we did after 9/11 was to go back to mosques throughout our state to say, we trust you, we want you to trust us. We need to work together to protect our state and our country. We know the difference between radical Islamic jihadists and hardworking, peace-loving Muslim Americans. And we need to go after the people who are trying to harm us, not go after everybody. And what happens when you paint it with that broad a brush is the innocent folks don't want to cooperate with you either because they're afraid. They're afraid just because of their religious beliefs that we're going to take action against them. We shouldn't be doing that. What we should be doing is going after the bad guys. And we have the ability to do that through getting the intelligence we need, doing the surveillance we need. And by the way, I did a case in New Jersey as U.S. Attorney where a large part of the reason we interdicted a terrorist attack that was known at the time as the Fort Dix Six. It was 6 self-radicalized Muslim Americans who were planning to attack Fort Dix and kill American soldiers. One of the biggest pieces of information we got in that case was from intelligence we got from people inside their own mosque who heard them talking about these things and came to law enforcement because they trusted us. We don't want that information flow to stop. We want it to continue. And so, you know, some people have said that Donald Trump is a bigot because he said ban all Muslim Americans. I know Donald Trump. He's not a bigot. He isn't. You can disagree with him, but he's not a bigot. He's just wrong. It's the difference between experience and inexperience. If you've never done it and you've never known how to protect the country, you never had the responsibility for it, then you might think the only way we're going to do this is to ban all Muslim Americans from the country. If you've actually done it, what you know is there's a much safer, smarter, more effective way to do it, and that is to use intelligence to find out who the bad people are, get information from the good people to help you on that, and then do what law enforcement's supposed to do under our Constitution. So again, it goes back to the difference between experience and inexperience. And on your larger question, what this country stands for on religion are the two things that are in the First Amendment. There are two things about religion in the First Amendment. The freedom of religion, the freedom to practice your religion, and the non-establishment of religion. I'm a Catholic. I believe wholeheartedly in my faith, and we are teaching our children our faith and hope that they follow that faith as well. You as a father should have the absolute right to do the same thing I'm doing, however you see fit.
I'm letting them make their own decision.
Well, my point is that that's your choice, and under our country, that's your choice. And I want everybody to make their choice. I believe that God is an important part of what this country is all about. But I also know that the great thing about America is everybody gets to believe what they want to believe. And as long as they're not trying to impose it upon me, they can believe what they want to believe, and as long as they're not committing violent acts to try to forward their point of view, go ahead and believe what you want to believe, teach within your family what you want to teach. And to me, that's the essence of what America is, and that's why those folks came here all those centuries ago, was to escape a system that was imposing a religion upon them that they didn't believe in and didn't feel in their hearts. So we need to be tolerant of each other. Doesn't mean we have to put up with violence, doesn't mean we have to put up with intolerance from others onto us, and it doesn't mean we have to put up with somebody telling you that what you believe is invalid. What you believe is what you believe in your heart. And I want everyone to follow their faith, or lack thereof in your case, as they see fit.
I think my biggest concern is legislation that's based out of a certain religion.
I just don't see it.
If it discriminates against.
I just don't see it. So I don't see it, and I don't think that's what my party stands for, and I don't think that that's what our party has tried to do to this country. We all have our own points of view. You as voters have a right to know what my point of view is on these issues and be able to make your judgments. But beyond that, you make your own calls. And I'm not offended by that in the least. We believe different things. It's okay. We don't have that in New Jersey, so I'm not going to go state by state and go through state laws, but we don't have it in New Jersey. Next question. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
In the past couple of years, we have seen a shift in the criminal justice system, specifically with low-level drug offenders. And my question is, how do you feel that mandatory minimums are serving the justice system, especially with drug offenders that are getting there through enhancements?
Yeah, it's not working. And that's why in New Jersey, what I've done is for low-level, non-violent, non-dealing drug offenders in New Jersey, you no longer go to jail on first offense. You go to treatment, mandatory treatment. But you don't go to jail anymore because it's not working. Now, the war on drugs was a good idea and well-intentioned in the beginning. Just say no and throwing people in jail and mandatory minimums were all reaction to awful things that were happening to families across the country. And we thought this was the way to fix it. We've now had 30 years or so of experience that tells us it's not. Now, for people who are violent and for people who deal drugs and profit from putting this poison into our families, there will always be a jail cell in my world for those people. And they deserve to go there, and I will work hard to make sure they're sent there, and I've worked hard in my career to make sure they're sent there. But drug addiction is a disease. It is a disease like cancer or heart disease or diabetes. It is a disease, everybody. And I doubt that there's anybody in this room whose family, friends, coworkers, or neighbors haven't been touched by this. And so I speak about it all the time in the context of my own mother, who was addicted to smoking. My mom started smoking when she was 16 years old, 1948. And back then, you didn't even know it was bad for you. But when she discovered it was bad for her, she tried to quit lots of times. I saw her as a kid. She tried the gum. She tried the patches when those came out. She even tried hypnosis one time. And we liked it because it kind of mellowed her out a little bit, which for my mother was very necessary. But it did nothing for the smoking, so she stopped going. And when she turned 71 years old, what was inevitable happened. She's diagnosed with lung cancer. When that happened, no one said to me, don't treat her, she's getting what she deserves. No one said to me, she made a choice, so don't treat her. She's getting what she deserves. Nor was I ashamed to tell people that my mother had lung cancer. I didn't feel like it reflected badly upon me or my family or even upon her. People asked what was going on with my mother, I told them. And I got prayers from people who were praying for her recovery, praying for her treatment. I wonder if my mother was a heroin addict, whether people would have felt the same way. Would they have said, treat her? Would they have said, we're praying for her? Would they have said, would I have said, my mother's a heroin addict? Would I have been willing to say that out loud? There's a stigma that's attached to this disease now that we're making a moral judgment on. It's wrong. It's wrong to try these drugs in the first place. We tell our kids this all the time. I pray that my children have the strength to never try it. And I work as hard as I can as a dad to try to make sure they don't. But there's not a person in this room, I suspect, who hasn't made a bad choice in your life that you might not want to take back. I know I have. I just got lucky it didn't involve drugs. But what about the person who makes that one bad choice, one bad night, and their genetics lead them to be an addict like that? And we've seen it happen. What do we do to that life? See, I've seen it happen. And I know that it doesn't matter how educated you are, doesn't matter how much money you have, doesn't matter where you live, doesn't matter what the color of your skin is, it doesn't matter what your religion is, doesn't matter, none of that matters. Drugs don't discriminate. So I talk also about a friend of mine from law school. He was in my study group, first year. Those are the people you're closest to in law school. Those are the ones that see you at your worst. When you're scared and you don't know whether you're going to make it, and you help each other get through it. And this particular fella was the smartest in our group. He got the best grades. He was one of the editors of the law review. He was the first one to get a job of us out of law school. He was the first one to become a partner in his law firm of us. He married a beautiful woman who was a doctor. They had 3 beautiful daughters. He had a great house, beautiful car, made lots of money, and loved his job. And, by the way, was the best looking among us and the best athlete. We hated him in many respects. And as age continued to press against us and we all got into our 40s, he continued to do all this athletic stuff. He ran, 12, 15 miles a week. And one of those days when he was out running, he hurt his back. And we kept telling him, you got to give in to age a little bit, brother. You can't be running as hard as you ran before. He went to the doctor, chiropractor, an orthopedist, couldn't get the back right. Then he went to a pain management doctor who gave him Percocet. A year later, I got a call from his wife. And she said, I've kicked him out of the house. He's addicted to Percocet. Now he's starting to drink. I can't trust him around the girls. And you guys need to do something to help. So the group of us who studied with him in law school went and did an intervention. He was living with his parents. We got him into treatment. And for the next 10 years, he was in and out of treatment. And he lost his wife. She divorced him. He lost his right to see his girls. He lost his job. Lost his license to practice law. Lost his driver's license. Lost his home. Lost his car. And ultimately spent through all of his money, including his retirement money. And a year and a half ago, Mary Pat and I got the call on a Sunday morning that we were dreading for a long time. They found him in a motel in New Jersey with an empty bottle of Percocet and an empty quart of vodka, and he was dead at 52 years old. By every way we measure success in this country, this guy had it. Great looking, athlete, smart, great education, great job, lots of money, beautiful wife, beautiful daughters, beautiful home. Every way that we say, man, that guy has got life by the throat. What a great life he has. He's dead. This just doesn't happen in the inner city neighborhoods. This just doesn't happen to people who aren't educated. This just doesn't happen to people who come from a single parent home or a no parent home. This happens to anyone. And that's why I look at that friend of mine when I sat at his funeral as the governor of New Jersey, across the aisle from his 3 daughters, who now didn't have a father. And I say, there but for the grace of God go I. And each and every one of us needs to start thinking that way. There but for the grace of God go I. And if we start thinking that way, we'll start talking about this differently, and we'll start getting treatment to people. It didn't work for my friend. It's not a panacea. It doesn't always work for everybody, but I'll tell you this, I'm pro-life. And see, to me, being pro-life means you gotta be pro-life the whole life, not just the 9 months they're in the womb. The 9 months they're in the womb is the easiest time, right? Any parent here knows the 9 months in the womb is the easiest time. They're not out, they've done nothing to disappoint us yet. It's much harder to be pro-life when they get out and they start doing things and making decisions. But a 16-year-old girl drug addicted to heroin on the floor of the county lockup, her life is a precious gift from God. My friend in his mid-40s, racked by addiction to Percocet and alcohol, who can't barely speak his own name, his life is a gift from God too. And we got to care about those people. And if we want to broaden our party and make it bigger, pro-life's got to mean more than just the 9 months in the womb, everybody. It's got to mean the whole life. And that means some hard decisions by us. But it means caring about people enough to give them treatment. We're not going to cure every person, but every life we save makes a family more whole. And throwing them in jail and not giving them treatment when they haven't committed a violent act and they haven't dealt drugs doesn't make any sense anymore. Let's make them go to treatment. Everyone that it works for, we've rebuilt a family. Everyone. They get their mother or father back, their husband or wife back, their sister or brother back, their son or daughter back. And any of you who know families who have gone through this know there's nothing more frightening, more debilitating, and more disheartening than having a family member who's addicted to drugs and not being able to get through to them and not getting to help them. So, you know, as a prosecutor for 7 years, I threw lots of people in jail. I have no hesitation in throwing bad people in jail. But I want it to work, and we got to make it work. And so as president, I would talk about this all the time. I would make more money available for treatment, and we could do it not by increasing budgets, but by spending less money on incarcerating people. Keep this statistic in mind for New Jersey. It costs us $49,000 a year to incarcerate someone. It costs $24,000 a year for inpatient drug treatment. I can treat 2 people for every person I incarcerate and be even from a money perspective. So.
Is part of it then changing the rhetoric on the prosecutor side of things, that they're looking for the kill, they're looking for the numbers, compared to, say you have here a third drug offense and aggravated, 2 years prison.
Well, listen, I think we have to re-examine all that. We've re-examined it in New Jersey. And listen, let me tell you, to give you my attitude about this, let me tell you what I told every new prosecutor I hired when I was U.S. Attorney. And I hired about 130 prosecutors in 7 years as U.S. Attorney. Right before I swore them in, before I gave them the oath of office to become an assistant United States attorney, I would bring them into my conference room. And on the wall in my conference room, there's a seal of the department. And I'd say to them, read that for me. Look at me like I was crazy, right? And they said, it says Department of Justice. And I said, yeah, I want you to read it again out loud. And they'd say Department of Justice. And I said, it doesn't say Department of Prosecution, does it? It says Department of Justice. Your job every day is to do justice. And justice isn't always about prosecuting. Sometimes justice is about other things. And you have enormous power as a prosecutor, enormous power. I would argue to you they're the most powerful people in our society. Department of Justice. That's what I told every one of them. And that's what I expected of them. And as President of the United States, that's what I would expect of the Attorney General I appoint to put in charge of the Department of Justice. And what I would tell that Attorney General to tell every one of the men and women who work under his or her charge is your job is to do justice. That's what this country expects. We demand at least that, and we'll accept nothing less than that. And as president, that's what I'll do. So thanks for raising the issue. It's an important issue. Yes, sir.
What's your plan to ensure that we have enough affordable and reliable electricity in the future?
It is to do kind of things that we've done in New Jersey. 53% of New Jersey's electricity is generated by nuclear power. Now, we're the most densely populated state in the country, and we have safely operated nuclear power now for 4 decades. It can be done. 3 Mile Island was a long time ago, everybody. We need to get over it. And nuclear needs to be a part of our portfolio. I would make sure that we continue to aggressively explore for oil and natural gas throughout the country so that we have a home grown, reliable supply of that energy. In New Jersey, we are now the third largest state in solar production in the country. You would never guess that, right? New Jersey? Right? The first two are Arizona and California. Easy to figure those out. Right? You could guess those. Go to a bar tonight, you'll drink free all night. Just ask them what's the third largest solar producing state. Everybody will get it wrong, right? We did it because in our state, so densely populated, so small in terms of the land mass, we can't do what you're doing here in Iowa with wind turbines. If we put wind turbines on land in New Jersey, we not only have dead birds, we probably have dead people. There's too many of us, 8.9 million people in a state this size. But solar works because solar is compact, and we can put solars on the roof of manufacturing plants, on the roofs of office buildings, shopping malls. We can put it on the roofs of homes. And we've partnered with the private sector to make it affordable. And so people are now selling energy back to the grid. It's been a real revelation for us. And we've used more natural gas in New Jersey now. My point to you is I think each state should be able to make the determination of what works for them. So here in Iowa, wind turbines work well, given your topography, given your land mass. You have the room. I've driven all through Iowa in the last 8-9 months. There are wind turbines all over the place. That's great. It's a good option. We use ethanol and biofuels. Don't worry about that because it's good. Business is coming, baby. It's all good news. Yeah, I'll answer it at one point, just for fun. And so my view on this is that we have to have a coordinated plan inside the United States, and then secondly, we have to have a plan that works with Canada and Mexico. North America could become the energy continent for the 21st century. With the resources Canada now has and Mexico, these are two friendly neighbors, not looking to invade us, not looking to wage war against us. What did the president do when offered this opportunity? He refused to do the Keystone Pipeline. I mean, how does that make any sense at all? We need to work with our allies to the north and south. We could make North America not only self-sustaining, but we could make ours an exporter of energy that could help us to bring more peace and more stability to the world. Would it be better to have Europeans buying energy from Canada, United States, and Mexico, or Russia? Is it better to have China buying energy from us or Iran? So I think we have to have a strategy both internally that uses all those and gives states the option to do what they think is most cost-effective and most attractive to their citizens. And we need a continental strategy with Canada and Mexico so that we can become the energy continent for the world. We do that, the world will be a more safe and stable place because we're not looking to conquer anybody, unlike the folks in Iran or the folks in Russia. So that's what I would do on energy, and I think it would help our country not only have more affordable energy, like in New Jersey, for instance, now, in the last 18 months, our energy bills have gone down 9%, because we built pipelines from Pennsylvania, where the Marcellus Shale is, and brought more natural gas into the state at cheaper prices, and the growth of solar has really helped lower our energy prices. And you imagine, for folks who are on a fixed income in my state, that makes a huge deal. It's one of the real difficult costs they have to deal with that they can't fiddle with. They're either going to be cold or hot or broke. If you lower those prices, they don't have to choose between those things. And so that's the way I would approach it as president. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Besides terrorism and the economy, one of the things that is weighing heavily on my mind as a Republican is the threat of a brokered convention, which would basically thwart the will of the people. And I would like to know what your stance is.
I don't want one. I want to win the nomination when the primaries are over. And listen, if you go back and you read stories going back 6, 7 cycles, every cycle there's stories about this. 4 years ago, I remember with Mitt Romney. Remember, Mitt won some early states, Rick Santorum won some early states, and everybody said, oh, there's going to be a brokered convention between Mitt Romney and Rick Santorum, and who's the white knight who's going to ride in on the horse? The reason I'm familiar with these stories is I was the white knight who was supposed to be riding in on a horse on a brokered convention. People wrote this stuff despite the fact that I had endorsed Mitt Romney in October. Like, did they really think that I was going to turn on the guy that I endorsed? The fact is that they write these stories every 4 years. I don't believe we're going to have a brokered convention. I believe this race is going to get from 12 to 4 or 5 right after New Hampshire. Iowa and New Hampshire is going to take this race from 12 to 4 or 5. And then we're going to do 11 states, on March 1st that are all proportional. No winner take all. But then, after March 15th, everything's winner take all. So I just don't believe that that will happen. I believe a consensus will build around a candidate. It's hard to see right now, but it's easier to see now than it was even 6 weeks ago, right? I mean, there were 17 of us. When I came to the Iowa State Fair in August, there were 17 of us. Now there's 12. And I bet you 6 weeks from now, there'll be 4. And we'll start to see it. So I understand your concern about it, but I think that cooler heads usually prevail. People who don't have a chance to win usually get out of the way. And then we'll have a coalescence.
The way I look at it is the RNC has picked the wrong candidate the last 2 times. If we let them pick the next candidate, we're going to lose.
Yeah, but the RNC, with all due respect, the RNC didn't pick the candidate. RNC didn't pick the candidate, the voters did. I have to tell you the truth. Listen, I know Reince Priebus. He's a very nice guy. Reince Priebus is not telling anybody, anybody that'll listen, who to vote for. Just isn't. And there's a couple of hundred national committee people. I couldn't name all of them. I mean, the fact is that the RNC doesn't tell anything. You know what the RNC, biggest job the RNC is right now is the debates. That's their biggest job. They set the rules with the networks for the debates. Other than that, they just have to, the way our system works now, unlike a century ago, where nobody really voted, and a whole group of people got back into the old smoke-filled room and decided who they wanted. That's not the way it works anymore. John McCain won the nomination in 2008 because after he won New Hampshire, he got momentum. He beat Mitt Romney. He beat the other guys in Florida. He beat them in South Carolina. He won. Mitt Romney won because he won. He won more states than Rick Santorum or anybody else. He won more delegates. He got a majority of the delegates. I think that's what happened this time. You can disagree with the choice, but I would disagree with you that the RNC made the choice. The Republican primary voters made the choice. And, they're going to make the choice this time, too. And anybody who thinks that there's some, wizard from Oz in the back room pulling the strings, if he's there or she's there, I haven't found them. And I don't think you're going to see that. I think you're not going to see a brokered convention. I think what you're going to see in the end is somebody is going to get to a majority of delegates before July in Cleveland. And we're going to go with a united party to Cleveland to be able to take on Hillary Clinton. That's what we're all fighting for now. But guess what? It's not going to look good until it happens. Because we all want it. I'm not ready to give in. Far from it. Right? So don't ask anybody to give in yet. I'm not going to. Don't you worry about it, man. I'm not giving in. I said, I didn't run 4 years ago because I wasn't ready to be president of the United States. I'm ready now. And once I've decided I'm ready, then I want you to decide whether I'm ready. If you decide, great. If you decide I'm not, I'll go home. It's all right. I'll do something. I'll make something of my life. Yes, sir.
I'm kind of going on the first question that you answered. You said, how do you know? Like, how can you tell who's the terrorist or not? So I want to ask you, how do you plan on beating ISIS if you can specifically tell who's the terrorist or who's not? And what does it take from the Syrian refugees?
Sure. When I said, how do you know, that was in response to his question about Senator Paul saying, I want more information from terrorists and less information from innocent people. You can find out. I found out over the years as a prosecutor. You have to use surveillance and intelligence and law enforcement techniques that allows you to connect the dots and use the data and information we have out there to find out who's up to no good. Now, sometimes we can't find out. Sometimes they're so good that they get it by you. But more times than not, if we're doing our job, we'll be able to find out. How do we beat ISIS? Twofold. First is to do what we need to do at home to protect against them and I've talked about that already. Second is you need to put together a coalition overseas of our European allies and our Sunni Arab allies, because everybody's got to have skin in this game. This cannot be America by itself. Doesn't work if it's us by ourselves. It has to be us with others, working together, both Arab and European. And you put together that kind of group like we did for the first Gulf War, that can be a pretty awesome force that can go after these folks. And I think we have to do both. We have to protect at home, and we have to go be aggressive against them where they live and keep them on the run. And what was the second part? It was ISIS and, the Syrian refugee problem. Listen, here's my answer on this is pretty easy. One, I would set up a no-fly zone and a safe zone in Syria so that Syrians didn't have to leave Syria. They don't want to leave Syria. They're leaving Syria because they're running for their lives, because their own government's murdering them, and has murdered 250,000 of them already. But if we set up a safe zone inside Syria protected by NATO troops that said, this is a safe zone, you go have your war in another place. Anybody who's not involved in the war, come here and be safe, be fed, be safe. Keep them there. They don't want to leave their own country. And we should make a safe place for them there, because it's in our interest to do that. Because I don't want Syrian refugees here as long as the FBI director says we can't vet them. The FBI director went before Congress and said, I cannot guarantee the American people that we can appropriately vet these people. Well, to me, that's the end of the conversation. Because the president's first obligation is to the American people, not to the Syrian people. It's to the American people. If the FBI director says he can fully vet those folks, sure, then I'd consider on a humanitarian basis taking some, but not until that moment comes. And it hasn't come yet. So what do we do to try to create a humanitarian situation? Create a safe zone in their own country and let them be safe and protected there. That helps to keep the world safer, and it doesn't force the United States or Europe or some of these Arab countries to take refugees, many of which ISIS has said they're going to infiltrate with terrorist warriors. They've told us their game plan. Why don't we believe them? I believe them. And I believe the FBI director when he says he can't vet them. I know him. He wouldn't say it if he didn't believe it. And so if he believes it, we got to count on him. We got to count on the experts. When we don't count on the experts, oftentimes we wind up hurting ourselves. So that's what I would do with Syrian refugees. Now they're telling me that I could take one more question, which means I'll take two. The reason for that is I want to make sure that my staff knows I'm still the boss. Because if none of you run for president, you know what it's like. Here's what running for president is like. You are surrounded every day by people who are younger than you, who tell you where to go and what to do all the time. It is only when I stand here in the middle of this room that I am free from the tyranny of the young. And I'm able to make my own decisions without them telling me, I got to get in the car, I got to get out of the car, I got to make this phone call now, get off that phone call, you got to make another call, wait, your radio hit is next, wait, all right, now you got to go back into the next town hall meeting. I get to take two questions, I'm taking two. So we'll start with you.
In the past 15 years, the cost of tuition has risen over 40%. What do you think is caused this, and what do you do to combat it?
He asked why tuition's gone up 40%. Because the colleges and universities know they can get away with it, that's why. I am living this nightmare as we speak. We have 4 children. The 2 oldest ones are in college right now. Andrew is a senior at Princeton. Sarah is a sophomore at Notre Dame. My total bill this year is $122,500. I can't even imagine that. And so why is that happening? I'll give you an example. This summer, we got a letter from Notre Dame. And it was from Father John Jenkins, the president at Notre Dame. And the first paragraph was something like this. He said, we want to thank you for the blessing you've bestowed upon us by entrusting the souls of your children to our care for their education, right? I mean, you read that paragraph and you can hear the theme from Rudy right in the background, right? You close your eyes, you can see the Golden Dome and Touchdown Jesus, right? Your heart starts beating. Are there any Catholics in the room? Okay. So now, for the Catholics in the room, after a paragraph like that, what's the next paragraph? It's the money paragraph, baby. These priests know how to separate you from your money like nobody in the world. They are trained to do this. So the next paragraph is, we're pleased to let you know that this year tuition will increase only 3.9%. Now, this is in a 1% inflation world, 3.9%. The lowest annual increase at Notre Dame in 40 years. Think about that. Now, the question is, why does that happen? Here's why it happens. Imagine that I made the decision about where Sarah, my oldest daughter, would go to school based upon the way I make every other decision about how I spend money. I go to the car dealer and I look at a truck I want, and they tell me how much it's going to cost me, and we haggle, and then they get to their final price. And then I decide, is that truck worth whatever that number is? If I think it is, I pay it. If I think it isn't, I walk out of the showroom. Imagine if after I got that letter, Mary Pat and I sat down and said, you know, Notre Dame's not a value anymore. At $62,500 a year, we don't think it's a value anymore. And we called Sarah downstairs. We said, Sarah, by the way, we know you love Notre Dame. We know you got great friends there, and you love the classes, and you love the football team, and all the rest of this stuff, and Touchdown Jesus, and First Down Moses, and the whole thing. You love all of it. But it's not a value for mom and dad anymore, so we're sending you someplace else that's cheaper. I don't know about you, but I believe that conversation would end with stamping feet, crying, running upstairs, slamming the door, telling me I'm ruining her life, and all the rest of it, right? Because she wants to go back there. And what would I react? I'd say to Mary Pat, all right, listen, we got to figure out a way to do this. If we have to take on more debt, or we have to, take a second mortgage on the house, or whatever we need to do, we got to figure out how to do that. Here's the problem. The colleges know that. They know I'm not making this decision based upon value. They know I'm making the decision on emotion. That I don't want to disappoint my little girl. That I want her to get a great education, and I want her to be happy. And if I can figure out any way to make it work, go into debt, do whatever I have to do, I'm going to do it. Because as a father, that's what I want for my kid. They're taking advantage of us. So what I would do on the cost side are two things. First off, here this morning, a number of you ordered food. I'm glad for that. When the check comes, what if you turn the check over and it said food, $25? And that's all it said. You'd call one of the waitresses over and say, hey, excuse me, could you just write out exactly what I had and how much each thing cost? So I'm happy to pay it, but I'd just like to know what each thing cost. I just paid the second semester Notre Dame bill Sunday before I left to come to Iowa on Monday. It's 3 lines, man. It says tuition, room and board, other fees. 30,000 something, right? And I don't question it. Right? I just go, oh, all right. I'm here for $25. I'm going to call the poor waitress over and say, could you write all this out? $30,000. I go, hey, where do I send the check? So first thing is, we need to require of them that they tell us how they're spending our money. Because I think if we knew how they were spending our money, we'd be angry and they'd be embarrassed. We don't need another 2 chemistry buildings built as a monument to somebody's ego who donated money to the university. I went into this whole thing about rock climbing walls. There's an epidemic in college campuses across the country of rock climbing walls. Now, I was at Iowa State. I don't mind that you all have rock climbing walls at Iowa State because you guys don't have rocks. So I understand. In Iowa, you don't have rocks. So, okay, you have a rock climbing wall. But I went to the University of New Hampshire. They have a rock climbing wall. They're the granite state. They have as many rocks as you have corn. There are rocks everywhere and mountains everywhere in New Hampshire. Go outside and climb those. What are we building a rock climbing wall for? Now, the press responded to this by saying, Christie's assault on college fitness. Now, look at me, okay? I've assaulted fitness in many ways. This is not one of them, all right? I'm just trying to make a point. There's a lot of waste going on there, and they need to tell us what they're spending our money on. And if they did, I think they'd be embarrassed, and I think that would start to put a little market force on it. Secondly, you should be able to unbundle your bill. And what I mean by that is you should pay for the things you're going to use and nothing else. That puts a market test on it. So if 98% of the people say, we're not using the rock climbing wall, they're not going to build the rock climbing wall because they won't have the money for the rock climbing wall. Or if they're going to have it, they're going to spend it out of their endowment. And so it won't affect tuition. So you say to me, how are we going to do this? Sounds like good ideas. How are we going to do it? This is the way you do it. Any school that will not be transparent about what they're spending the money on and allow you to unbundle their bill will not be permitted to participate in the federal student loan or the federal student grant program. You want to use taxpayer money? That's fine, but you need to tell us what you're spending that money on, and you got to give us the opportunity to spend money as we see fit. That's an easy way to do this. And it's the only way we're going to put a market force on a decision that's driven by emotion. This gentleman has his Yale hat on. Did you go to Yale? Yeah. All right. I was there with Bush. All right. So now think about this. He was there with George W. Bush, which means you graduated in the early 60s, right?
He was 2 years ahead of me. I graduated in
1970. All right, so that's now 45 years ago. He's still wearing the hat. I point that out because this is an emotional thing. It's not a practical thing. He remembers his years at Yale fondly enough that 45 years later, he's still wearing the hat. How about this guy with the Notre Dame jacket on, right? Did you go to Notre Dame? No? Do you have? All right. We're going to move to the guy with the Iowa hat on. Or the UNI hat. I mean, the fact is that these things are emotional connections, and the colleges and universities know they're emotional connections, and they're profiting off of it. That's what they're doing to us. So we've got to artificially put market forces into effect so that you don't go broke. Or you. Well, we know that we're going broke. We're definitely going broke. The question is, after we go broke, how far into debt is he going to go to finish the job? It's scary. I mean, think about it. You know, Princeton is $60,000 a year, and Notre Dame's $62,500. I mean, that means over the course of time, these guys, if they finish in 4 years, are going to spend $250,000 on their education. You know, it's extraordinary, and it's not right, and they have had unfettered access to our capital. We got to start controlling it, and that's the way I would do it. All right, I can take one more. Let's go to that gentleman back there. Thank you, sir.
I'll ask you an economic question.
All right.
All right, we have a huge problem with federal debt. It's big. I took a look. It takes almost the combined tax revenue of almost all the Midwest states just paid interest bill on our national debt. I love a flatter tax plan. You know, I think if you decide that you want more and you work at that third job, federal government shouldn't get half of it. We need a strong national defense, and I know you support that. When we look at where we're spending money as a country, national defense is the biggest chunk of it. How, in 4 years, can you make a meaningful impact on our national debt?
Well, I would just disagree with one part of your question. National defense is not the biggest part of where we're spending it. 71% of federal spending in the current budget is on entitlements and debt service. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and debt service. 71 cents of every dollar we tax and borrow is spent on entitlements and debt service. Go to my website, to chrischristie.com. I am the only candidate in this race still. I started saying this in April when I presented my entitlement reform plan. And I figured someone would come up with a competing plan. It's now December. No other candidate in this race, Republican or Democrat, has come up with a competing entitlement reform plan because they don't want to talk about it, because it's difficult. And people ask me, why am I going to reform entitlements? It's like when they asked Willie Sutton, why does he rob banks? He said, because that's where the money is. We have to reform entitlements. If you're spending 71 cents of every dollar on entitlements and debt service, why are we arguing over the 29 cents? We could argue, we could eliminate the 29 cents completely, and we'd still be in bad shape. So this is what I've said. On entitlements, it's a 12-point plan, and God knows I'm not going to put you through that, okay? You want to do the 12-point plan? And in fact, I was at a town hall last night, and someone had actually printed it out. Like, that guy gets a gold star for sure, right? And they asked me about it. But go to the website and see all 12 points. I'll give you 4 of them, because they're the 4 most important. On Social Security. Social Security is going to be bankrupt within 8 years if we don't do something. 8 years. So this isn't the next generation's problem. It's our problem. We have to raise the retirement age. I say we raise it 2 years and we phase it in over 25 years. That means it'll go up 1 month a year every year for the next 25 years. That means for people who are on Social Security now, it doesn't affect you. For people who are close to Social Security, it may affect you by a couple of months, but nothing significant. But it will really affect my children. And it should, because, by the way, life expectancy now, the average life expectancy of a woman in this country is 83. The average life expectancy of a man is 79. I saw a few women smiling. I just want you to understand that 10 years ago, you were 6 years ahead of us. Now you're only 4 years ahead of us. We're gaining on you. And what this means is that 4-year vacation you're expecting from us at the end of your life, you may not get it. You may be stuck with us the entire time. These programs were designed when people died at 65. And it was a great deal for the government, right? You paid into Social Security your whole life. You retired at 62 back then. You collected for 3 years on average, and then you died. And the government's like, hey, good deal for us, right? Now, when people live to 83, 84, 85, you're collecting for 20 years. It doesn't work. So we need to raise the retirement age. Secondly, we need to means test Social Security. What do we mean by that? If you make more than $200,000 a year in retirement income, you're retired, this doesn't count your house, this is, you have enough money saved, which would be about $4 or $5 million if you assume a 5% rate of return, to throw off $200,000 a year. Let me ask you a question. Is Social Security really going to make a difference in your day-to-day life? If you're making $200,000 a year in retirement, it's not. And so under my plan, you wouldn't get Social Security. Now, I hear you. You put the money in. But let me be the guy who brings you the bad news, okay? The government lied to you, and they stole your money. This money's supposed to be in a trust fund, right? You're paying every 2 weeks the payroll tax supposed to go in a trust fund. Let me tell you, you remember back in 2000, Al Gore called it the lockbox, right? Let me tell you what's in the lockbox. A stack of IOUs. We're spending that money right now. We're spending it now, we're giving you IOUs. We said, we'll pay you later. When you retire, we'll pay you. Well, it's a stack of IOUs in there. So the reason I believe we should cut off benefits for people at that level is because we're going to have to get at the people who have done the most prosperous in this country. Because for most folks who collect Social Security and need it, it's the difference between rent and heat and food. We don't want those people to do without Social Security. They won't survive. The person who's making $200,000 a year in retirement income, they'll survive just fine without Social Security. And the fact is, the only other alternative is, it's like your checkbook, everybody. We have more money going out than coming in. If the only way to fix it is either spend less or raise more. Hillary Clinton is going to tell you, and said the other night at the debate, she just take the cap off the Social Security tax and tax everybody on every dollar they have with the payroll tax. Okay, it's not a feasible idea, except let me ask you a question. Why would you give more money to a program where the government's already lied to you and stolen from you? Why? Because they promised this time they won't? I mean, that would be like if someone opened a local bank here and it went belly up and you lost some of your money. And then 2 years later, the guy who started the bank comes to your front door and he says, yeah, I remember me. I was the guy who had the First National State Bank in, right downtown. Yeah, that bank went under, didn't it? It did. But I'm opening a new one now. I'm opening the Second National State Bank, and I'd like you to give me your deposits. And you say, well, why would I give you deposits? I lost my money the last time you went belly up. He said, well, because I learned. Now listen, I know people in Iowa are very nice, but he's not getting off your front porch with any of your money. I know he's not. I'm not putting money in that bank. Forget about it. Social Security is a bank. It is a bank where you put your money on the promise you'd get it back when you retired. They stole it. Why are you giving them more? I mean, in New Jersey, the way we would say this is don't be stupid. Like, don't be stupid. Don't give them more. Hillary Clinton's going to promise you, I swear this time we won't take it. Come on. Let's be real here. The only way to make sure the government doesn't waste your money is for them not to have it in the first place. And so by reducing benefits to people who don't need it, I understand they'll be angry about it, but they should be angry at all the people who stole their money already. I'm the guy who's here to clean up. And that's what we're going to do. And we'll do the same thing on Medicare. Raise your eligibility age 2 years, phase in it over 25. And on Medicare premiums, right now, for a person at that level, we subsidize their premiums 75%. We'll subsidize it 10%. If you make over $200,000 a year in retirement income. If you don't, this does not apply to you. But the big thing here is that if you look at the 12 points that we go through, it's been scored by the Congressional Budget Office, it saves $1 trillion over the next 10 years. That's what we need to do to make the program solvent, and by the way, to have some money to spend on national defense, and to spend on and this is the other thing I would spend some of that money on, is the National Institutes of Health and the National Science Foundation, which this president has reduced, because I want to get treatments for those diseases. The 4 major diseases that cost us the most money in this country: heart disease, cancer, diabetes, Alzheimer's. Why not spend more money up front to try to find cures and treatments for those diseases, rather than waiting till people are afflicted with those diseases near the end of life, and then we pay a fortune to treat their diseases then? So if we spend that money up front, we're not only going to help improve quality of life, we're also going to cut the amount that we have to pay at the end of their life if someone's not afflicted with diabetes, afflicted with Alzheimer's, afflicted with heart disease or cancer. It's not only humane, it's smart. And so that's what I would do and why I do that. And that's how we get at the national debt, because if we don't contain the thing that we're spending 71 cents every dollar on, we could eliminate the rest of it and we wouldn't make a dent in the debt. We've got to do that. And the last thing we need to do is grow the economy. Because this debt problem is an accordion. You can't just push from one side. You can't just be the cut side. We're at $19 trillion in debt. You can't cut your way out of that problem. You need to cut your way out of that problem and grow your way out of the problem, both. And by the way, in 4 years, I won't put a dent in it. Maybe a little one. 8 years, we'll put a bigger one. But remember something, Barack Obama has incurred more debt in his 7 years than all of his predecessors combined, from George Washington to George W. Bush. More debt from Barack Obama than all of them combined. He has dug us an enormous hole, and it's going to take us a while to dig out of it. So that's the way I would do it. Let me end by saying 2 things. First, thank you. Thank you to everyone here for hosting us. Thank you for coming and listening. I really appreciate it. People in New Jersey ask me all the time what it's like to campaign here. And I tell them that if you've become cynical about politics, you need to come here. Because people like you take time in the middle of your day to come and listen to folks like me and really give us a fair hearing. And that's what democracy is supposed to be all about. And you all reinvigorate every 4 years our democracy, because you participate, because you bring your kids, because you know it's their turn next. And people in Iowa and New Hampshire do this, and it's incredibly encouraging for America's democracy. So for all those cynical people in New Jersey, and there are a few, I tell them, come here and watch this, because if you see it, you won't be cynical, nearly as cynical anymore. Second thing is this. This has been a really entertaining campaign. Even being a part of it, it's been entertaining. You know, we had 17 people at the beginning. We had governors and former governors. We had senators and former senators. We had business people, and we've had a character. And it's been very entertaining to stand up there and hear some of the things that have been said, some of the points of view, some of the stuff that have actually come out of people's mouths on the stage has been head shaking for me at moments, but it's been entertaining. And I know that you all have been entertained at moments. There are moments you've been sitting in front of your television set and you probably laughed out loud and been really entertained. I'm glad for you. That's good. But there's 33 days to go to the Iowa caucus. Showtime is over. It's game time. It's game time now. We're not electing an entertainer-in-chief. We're electing a commander-in-chief. And you all are going to have a disproportionate impact on who that person's going to be. And so what I'd say to you is that for those of us who are working hard and participating in this process and want your support, and I do, I'm here this morning to ask for your vote, every one of you, to ask you to caucus for me on February 1st. But showtime is over. It's game time. And you're the players. Because come February 1st, I'm not a player anymore in Iowa. I'm not. My plan is over. My game plan will have been executed. I will have worked as hard as I could. You guys put the helmets on and strap on the chin straps on February 1st. And your game, it's your game then. You decide. And man, I want you to do it. And I'll be content whatever you decide. Goes my way, I'll be thrilled. Doesn't go my way, I'll understand. Because you guys get to make the decision. So all I want you to know is, like, I don't begrudge anybody the entertainment. I've enjoyed it too. But it's game time now, everybody. It's serious. And our country faces too many challenges and too many opportunities to hand this over to an amateur. We handed our country to an amateur 7 years ago, and we seen the result. We cannot do it again. He ran up more debt than all of his predecessors combined. There are fewer democracies in the world today than when he took office. America is less safe and less secure than when he took the job from George W. Bush. America's economy is growing at 1.5%. We have seen what having an amateur in the Oval Office does. No matter how good a speech he gives, no matter how handsome he and his family are, no matter how well he reads a teleprompter. It's how you decide when you sit in the chair. So I'm asking you for your consideration, but more than that, I'm asking you for your trust and your confidence. See, if I get your vote, I'll become president. But if I don't have your trust and confidence too, I won't be a successful president. I not only need your vote, I need your trust and your confidence. If you give it to me, I will work harder than anybody to get the job done the right way. But I need all three of those things. So I hope you'll consider that over the next 33 days. I appreciate you coming this morning and listening. I appreciate your questions. And I look forward to seeing you all again soon. Thanks for coming this morning. I appreciate it.